بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلوا به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الحديث حديث محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, before I begin, I don't pretend to have any knowledge of Islam other than the qualification that I've been a teacher, hence I'm doing this talk. So for any goodness that comes from me, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and any wrongdoings or any mistakes with myself and shaitan. We all know, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu ku anfusikum wa ahlikum nara. O you who believe, save yourselves and your families from the hellfire. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to save ourselves first and foremost, because as we know, Yawm al-Qiyamah, we only care about ourselves, and then to save our families from the hellfire, whose fuel is men and stones. And in many ways, the issue of non-Muslim schools is very closely related to this. There was a famous program once about learning to teach, and it was called Into the Lion's Den, because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, being a teacher is not a easy ride. It's at the very least an interesting profession, and when you're trained to teach, there's lots of challenges, especially in the current climate of pupil behaviour, so on and so forth, that makes you feel like being thrown into a lion's den, literally. But let's take the analogy for ourselves, that those of us with children in non-Muslim schools, those of us who are in non-Muslim schools, the young amongst you, we are in a daily battle in a lion's den, where survival of our Islam, survival of our Iman is a challenge. And you'll see, and it's a simple experiment, to stand outside any secondary school at home time or lunch time and just look at the mannerisms and the behavior of the children, and you'll see yourself that many of us go into that den and are mauled, are destroyed, because you'll see the Muslims involved in all the haram. You'll see them smoking, you'll see them drinking, you'll see them taking drugs, you'll see them fornicating in public. This is the situation of the Muslims. This is the situation of the Muslims today. That when we see the Muslims in schools, forget about praying, forget about keeping the beard, forget about covering their bodies. it's a much worse and much more desperate situation for the Muslims. And that's why I have a keen interest in the Muslims in non-Muslim schools. Because simple mathematics tells you that no matter how many, well, not no matter how many, but in our lifetime, it's highly improbable, Allah knows best, that there will be enough Muslim schools to cater for the Muslim students. Look at the number of Muslim students. MashaAllah, the Muslims are, the population is growing of the Muslims. So how are we catering for the Muslim students in non-Muslim schools? And that's what I'd like to look at today. There's no doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put the issue of knowledge first and foremost amongst the Muslims. And the issue of knowledge starts with knowledge of Islam, the Quran and Sunnah. And that is what is the most preferred and the most noble in terms of knowledge. But that doesn't mean our secular knowledge has become unneeded. We're trying to get away from the stereotype that if you're in the mosque and you're half of the Quran, that's all you're ever good for. My common thing when I tell someone I'm a teacher is, do you teach Quran, do you teach Arabic, do you teach Urdu? This kind of stereotype. Still amongst the Muslims, that's their concept, that you got a beard, you must be teaching something like Quran or something. And when I say I'm teaching another subject, really? Secular knowledge is not something which is separate from Islam. We need people who are experts in their fields. We need people who are experts in medicine, in accountancy, whatever the field may be, engineering. We need experts in these fields because this is how the Muslims will be raised up from their lowly position. First and foremost from their knowledge of Islam and returning to the Quran and Sunnah, and then from being in a position where we can help other Muslims. So when we are sending our children to non-Muslim schools, let's be aware firstly that we're throwing them into a lion's den. And I'll go into why we're throwing them into a lion's den in due course. But we need to remember that our children are our investment. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has told us in an authentic hadith that when the son of Adam dies, everything ceases for him except three: recurring charity, recurring knowledge, and children who make dua for him, children who are good Muslims. So it's in our own interest, if for nothing else, that our children, when we die, will at least pray, will at least make dua for us, that through them, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive us. So it's our investment. And if we had money in our pocket, none of us would wish to throw it away. So in exactly the same way, we should not throw our children's education, our children's deen, in fact, throw it away. So when we say non-Muslim schools, what do we mean? There's a whole variety of non-Muslim schools that you can think about. You have on the one extreme Church of England schools or Catholic schools, which for the most part our parents know that, okay, that's not where I should send my child, that's a Christian school or a Church of England school or a Catholic school. But there are schools in London where they're Church of England and they're 99% Muslim. Strange irony, but nevertheless true, because the population of, especially in inner London, of non-Muslims, Muslims is growing. So in certain localities, Christian or Catholic schools are closing down because there's no longer a need for them in that locality. But in other areas, because there's so many Muslims there, they're keeping the schools running. So you've got that. Then you've also got schools which are, as we know, faith schools, which we have things like Jewish schools and Hindu schools, so on and so forth, which alhamdulillah I don't think any of our Muslim children arrive in. And then you have the normal state comprehensive, which is where the majority of our children are admitted into. And within that you have single-sex schools, so you have male-only schools and female-only schools. And alhamdulillah, for the most part, parents at the very least try to send their children to a single-sex school, so the girls only attend a girls-only school and the boys only attend a boys-only school. And it is a requirement from each council to have at least one of those schools, a non-religious and a segregated school within each borough. But regardless of the type of school your child goes to, regardless of the type of school that your child attends on a daily basis, there's still some common problems. There are still some things which we as Muslims, which is against the teachings of Islam and means that we're endangering our children's futures. It may be useful to start with the simple fact that our children spend 35% of their time in the school. So, of the time they are awake, which is, if you give 8 hours a day to sleeping, and then you're left with, the rest. If you work out from that time, over a week, 35% of their time, they're actually, at the very minimum, in a school. When they're in school, you've got a variety of problems. Start with, for example, music. As is clear, inshallah, I hope the brothers and sisters are aware that music is haram. A very good book on it is The Ruling of Music and Singing by Abu Bilal Mustafa al-Kanadi. Very good book, deals with all the evidences for and against and comes to a clear conclusion that music is haram. So you've got students in these schools where they have to sing songs, they have to play musical instruments, they're encouraged to join bands, they're encouraged to join concerts, do their Christmas presentation, performances every year, maybe an Easter performance, and they call it, talent spotting and these kind of things. So you've got that problem with music in the curriculum. You then go on to things like art. Common thing, people come to me, is it not allowed for Muslims to draw faces? And you have to explain once again to people that it is haram for a Muslim to draw faces. As the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, they will be the worst of creatures on Yawm al-Qiyamah because they'll be asked to give life to that which they've created and drawn with their own hands, and they will be unable to do so. So then you've got this art curriculum where the children have to go around and draw self-portraits or portraits of one another, and in intricate detail, the nose, the eyes, the mouth, everything they can. You've got the issue of science and sex education, or maybe in science, or may also be in other subjects I'll come into in a minute, and our children being taught sex education by, for want of better words, some really kind of evil characters, which I'll come into a bit more in detail in a minute. Within science, you've got the theory of evolution. There was a big kind of debates within the educational papers about these Christian schools that were being financed by some millionaire up north in Middlesbrough. And these schools, they had this Christian backer, and obviously, one thing that Christians believe in is, Adam was created as well. So there was a big thing that one minute, the children are being taught creationist theories, creationist theory, which basically means that the human being was created. And of course, as Muslims, this is what we believe, that Adam alayhi salam was created, and from Adam, Hawa, as I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, and from them many men and many women. So this concept that creationism is a foreign concept. It's like, what's that? How can that be? And they pump this idea of evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution, that we all came from apes and we evolved to what we are today. Then we have things like religious education, which doesn't necessarily mean that we don't necessarily say it's haram to understand other religions, but when you have particular teachers, I know, for example, where I teach now, I've discovered one of the teachers teaches Ari is an evangelical Christian, and he spends holidays going around the world preaching Christianity. And you can imagine if he's trying to teach a lesson on Islam and his kind of an idea and concepts and all these kind of things come into it. So you have to be careful about that. Then you've got things like homosexuality. There's something called, a couple of years ago, called Section 28, which is outlawing discrimination against homosexuals, which obviously you may not think it's a big thing, but then that starts to mean that they have to start talking about homosexuals and how they allowed to be they have their own choice of sexuality, so on and so forth. To the extent that subhanAllah is amazing. I went to my staff room. There's a big poster there. It was like, something along the lines of, do you know any 14 or 15-year-olds who were willing to take part in a homosexual questionnaire to talk about their sexuality, so on and so forth. So these are kind of ideas that are being pumped through the school system to our children. And we should realise that the whole culture of the school is important. There's been mentioned many times by sociologists the whole thing about the hidden curriculum, that school is not just about going to school and earning your grades and coming back and doing your homework. There's a hidden curriculum, the thing that they try to teach you, by default, by going to school. And some of these ideas I mentioned, these are the kind of things that start to become second nature. And I suppose the best way we can maybe summarize it is Muhammad once mentioned that one of the problems of us being in the West is that we may not necessarily start believing these things. I'm not trying to say that we start believing that homosexuality is okay, so on and so forth. Some people probably do. But it's our whole kind of sensitivity to the issue is no longer there. And this reminded me of the saying of one of the Sahabis, who I forget right now his name, but he mentioned that we should commit a sin and it was like a mountain fell on our heads. That's how serious we would consider the sin. And yet now you commit sins and it's like a fly, you just kind of swat out the way, so on and so forth. So that's how our children become. They see homosexuals, they have no feelings to say, oh, it's okay, it's a free world, they can do what they wish, and so on and so forth. So all these kind of concepts start being developed in our children's minds. So you spend time in the school where they're continually exposed to this kind of messages, this kind of subliminal, if you want to call it that, but hidden messages through the school curriculum that affects our children. Then if you move on to thinking to things like peer pressure, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, the example of a good companion in comparison with a bad one is that of the musk seller and the blacksmith. From the first, you'll either buy musk or enjoy its good smell, while the battles will either burn your clothes or your house, or you get a bad, nasty smell. So that the biggest thing here is that our children spend time amongst themselves, unfortunately. So, I'll be honest, some of the worst children are Muslims. Sometimes they're a bad effect on the Muslim, non-Muslim children. But generally, you send your children to be, with these people who are non-Muslim, and to be honest, most of the parents don't really care about what they get involved in, and then obviously that will impact upon the Muslim children. So you get this whole kind of peer pressure situation where Muslim children will get involved into a number of things. Stealing. You know how serious the thing stealing is in Islam. That Muslims become thieves quite easily. It's like a common thing, common story. Someone nicked my mobile phone, find out who did it. I had one case last week. Muslim boy got excluded for 10 days, stole someone's mobile phone. Lying, it's a common thing, it's like they lie as if it's like nothing on their tongues. It's like, they lie in front of your face, in front of people, in front of head teachers. Anyone comes on and just carry on lying, and they'll carry on insisting that what they're saying is true, although the evidence will be completely, contrary to that. So how does this affect you? Because it affects you because then your children start thinking, well, lying's okay. He lied to his parents to get out tonight. I'm going to lie to my parents to get out tonight. Or she lied here, and I'm going to lie as well. And they start get this kind of culture together where they just think it's fine to start lying, not just to teachers, who they don't really respect anyway, but to their own parents. Haram relationships. Alhamdulillah, I don't work in a non-Muslim school, but obviously, being young, there are temptations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put naturally in the human being. However, most of us manage to control them, but when they're in school, when these temptations are not frowned upon, when these things are kind of like, celebrated if you wish, they get involved in things which are obviously haram. And I don't want to go obviously into intricate details, but one thing leads to another, and you could find, as you do here, many stories, teenage pregnancies, so on and so forth. These are all dangers that our children face on a daily basis. Then as I mentioned before, teachers. Not all teachers are, fine, outstanding members of the community. The fine teachers who are homosexual, You'll find teachers who are alcoholics. You'll find teachers who are just generally sad people. They will, they will be involved in talking about, just the other day I was standing in the corridor and one guy was saying, right, going to meet in the pub tonight, this time, that time, and they're having a big discussion. There's some parents there as well. It was just in my head, I was thinking, subhanAllah, these parents are sitting there and they're discussing where they're going to meet in the pub at the end of Friday night. So it's kind of common culture. So go to the pub Friday night, Christmas parties, every break you get, every half term, the teachers are off on a kind of, whatever you want to call it, out in the pubs, out in the parties, and that's a kind of common thing. So once again, these teachers are teaching your children. And I remember when I was at school, we used to have one teacher who, I haven't seen it this bad in my school at the moment, but he used to go out every lunchtime. So you come in the afternoon, you just think of alcohol because he spent all lunchtime drinking. But at my current school, I can't say that's a problem, but it is obviously an issue that can actually occur. So it's the teachers as well. Then you have some of the traditions within the school bound to people. Maybe kind of thing where in a kind of house system where you have to bow to your prefect, and the prefect bows in front of the teachers, so on and so forth, which we know is also haram. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade anyone to give sajda to another human being. You've got things like hymns, mottos, and all these kind of issues within, especially in the kind of more traditional schools, the kind of mottos of their school, what they believe in, things like when children get older, I've known of people where they haven't been able to keep a beard. They have to shave their beard because it looks messy. So can you shave your beard, make sure you look smart, so on and so forth. Then you've got some of the church schools, even though, like I mentioned, some church schools may be majority Muslim, because they're Church of England schools, they still have to fulfill some sort of kind of Christian ethos. So you might have, for example, going to the chapel. Some of these schools have built-in chapels, so they have to go there. And if you don't go there, they get in trouble. And you get in trouble and it gets taken further and further, and sometimes you get these teachers who are, like I said, maybe evangelical Christians or firm Christians. They will force your child, you must go, I'll take you to a teacher. The child, maybe not knowing any better, will just end up going. And next thing you know, they make him sing hymns. And I remember brothers telling me that if they didn't even sing their hymns, they went to the chapel, sat at the back, that was okay. No, they had to start singing their hymns with the rest of the students. And if they didn't sing and the teacher watched their mouths, if they weren't moving their mouths, then they get in more trouble, so on and so forth. So, obviously, that becomes something which is around there, not to mention things like Christmas plays and acting out as if you're Jesus, A'udhu Billah, and all these kind of things like this you have to start doing on a regular basis. Also, even if you take these things, as I mentioned already, the previous things here, you think, well, I'll teach my child, I want them to go here, I want them to go there, so on and so forth. You then have problems like prayer facilities. We know Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, teach your children pray at 7 and beat them at 10. So many schools haven't got prayer facilities. So there's nowhere to pray, there's nowhere to go for Dhuhr, there's nowhere to go for Asr in winter, there's nowhere to go for Jummah. So people are stuck, or students are stuck. And likewise, there's no wudu facilities. Probably the biggest problem students have, you probably remember your own school toilets back in the days, they're not exactly the nicest of places. So they have to go there and make wudu, and then from make wudu, find a place to pray, and by then the lunch queue's finished and they can't go to lunch, so on and so forth. All these kind of simple, what we take for granted maybe on a daily basis in universities or in our workplaces become much more difficult for our children because they can't do these things. And remember that most of my children are young, they haven't got the confidence maybe to say, excuse me, can I go and make wudu, can I go and pray somewhere, they'll just keep quiet and not pray, and they'll wait till they get home and start praying then, which obviously, maybe in the summer you just about get away with it, in the winter it's impossible. You need to be praying during the school day. So, these are some of the problems we have. And then we also have some of the problems we create for ourselves as Muslim parents or as Muslims. many times you'll find, occasionally I should say, you'll find Muslim students within schools who uphold one part of Islam and then they let themselves down on another. So we get mixed messages from them. Let me give you an example. I had one student who refused to wear a tie, and I didn't speak to his mum. I spoke to the assistant head teacher who explained to me, so what's this about Muslims can't wear ties? And I had to explain to him that some Muslims consider it haram because it's a symbol of Christianity and so on and so forth. And then I said, which student was it? And he mentioned the student's name. And that same student who wouldn't wear a tie never turned up for Salah. So, I mean, you can't take peripheral issues like wearing a tie and leave the kind of, the fard issues which they have to do on a daily basis, and that is to pray. And likewise, you'll find students insist, I must wear a topi in my head, I must wear a kufi in my head, I'm not going to go to school without a kufi. And you'll see them walk around the playgrounds, all these heads, mashallah, they look nice. But you never see them for Dhuhr and you never even see them for Jummah. So what kind of messages are they giving to the non-Muslim students, teachers and non-Muslim students? That I want my Islam where I make an argument about it, but when it comes to the simple things like praying and so on and so forth, they're not interested. And likewise, parents are not educated enough. Many of us we don't know as a common little while what we can do, but some of us will make silly things like I don't mind. For example but they will do things where they will not allow the child to do something, being extra, strict on a certain thing, but then on other things they will be lax. So as parents, we need to be, I'll come into a bit more detail actually, as parents, what we can do to actually get our children a better deal within Muslim schools. Some of the things that I've mentioned, funnily enough, came up in an article this week within the teaching papers of a school in Walthamstow. I'll mention it because it's public knowledge. Central Foundation Girls' School in Tower Hamlets. Now this school is a girls-only school, obviously, and the majority of pupils, as you can imagine, in Tower Hamlets are Muslim. Now, it was interesting reading this article because, once again, it was fulfilling lots of stereotypes about Muslims and what Muslims can and can't do, so on and so forth. But it was interesting just to see that some of the things that were mentioned in this article, back to the whole idea of schools being dangerous places. For example, the head teacher writes 4,500 letters every year to explain why their daughters should take biology, sex education, religious studies and life drawing. So it's not a question of we respect your values. As some schools, and I'll mention another school, they do respect your values and fair enough, we appreciate you, it's against religion, don't get involved. You can withdraw from these particular subjects. It's rather a question of why are you being so stupid, don't be backwards, wake up, kind of smell the roses, you should be letting your daughters do the following things. So she writes 4,500 letters every year to explain to the parents why they should be allowed to do these things. For example, Bizet's Carmen, which I presume is a musical, alhamdulillah, the parents refused to allow the daughters to go on stage. How much more haram can you get? First it's musical, then it's going to be acting out, which is haram, so on and so forth. So she was trying to explain why is it that Muslims aren't allowed to do these things, they should be allowed to do this, so on and so forth. And goes on to say a number of things about Muslims, so on and so forth. And then this is the point I was making regarding parents being more involved. One student, who I won't mention, says, my parents know that if they do not let me discuss things like Christianity, there's no point in me coming to school. Which I thought was a bit of a strange point to make. But the point I'm making here was discussing Christianity is not a a haram issue. Yeah, we can't say knowing about Christianity is haram. It's something that we should be able to understand, and we should be able to argue against, debate against. This is something we should be able to do. So there's no point parents saying, I don't want my daughter going to Christianity classes, because there's nothing haram in that. So this is what I'm talking about, where Muslims sometimes, the parents need to be educated. They just think, okay, it's Christianity, must be haram, stop that, we won't let them do that. And it goes on to mention a number of things that parents, when they get involved and they realise that what we're talking about is not so difficult, not so against religion, parents are quite happy to allow their daughters to go on and do these things. But one of the things that Muslims we suffer from is our inferiority complex. That many times we won't say things because we're scared of making a fuss, or we're scared of making ourselves look embarrassed, or making a stand against things, because we have this kind of mental kind of block about standing up for ourselves. And it doesn't help when the person here who is a Muslim starts saying things like the attitudes of some parents were very, very abnormal. So it doesn't help when Muslims themselves, don't support one another. We don't kind of come together on common understanding about what is haram and what isn't haram, so on and so forth. I mean, most of the things I mentioned to you today, they're quite clear. Inshallah, if anyone wanted to look at the authentic evidence of Quran and Sunnah, you'll see that all these things are haram. So it doesn't help when Muslims who are in prominent positions start saying that it's very, very abnormal that students can't go and play music, or they can't do musical production, so on and so forth. On the other hand, there are some schools where Islamic beliefs or values are more respected. There's a school in Tooting called Ernest Bevan, which was in the article last week, where they found that many of the Muslim students, they overperform, because the whole another topic altogether is that Muslims underachieve, which is a whole different issue altogether. That Muslims underachieve, that their performance is very, very poor. They don't do very much in terms of education. So this school, where they respect Islam a bit more, they allow them to go Jummah, they allow them to go out for Jummah, they allow the women to wear the jalbiya and the hijab, so on and so forth. They allow them to withdraw from certain subjects that they're not happy about taking on. They found that the results improved because the Muslim students were happier. So that's what I'm going to take on now, because I think one of the things that we sometimes forget to do is that we stand back and allow everyone to do things to us, as opposed to taking a proactive role. This is taken from Muhammad Jabali, who has written a number of books about bringing up children and so on and so forth. And he's mentioned a number of things about how we as Muslim parents can improve the situation of our Muslim students in non-Muslim schools. Firstly, you need to be proactive. I mean, schools will have a parents' evening once a year, and then maybe write 1 or 2 reports about your child. It's no good waiting a whole year to the end of the year to realise that your child has done absolutely nothing all year. There's no harm in you, as I know my current school, they have this open evening once a week. Walk in, make an appointment with the head teacher, speak to their teacher, ask him about why is it my son has to do this, why is it my daughter has to do this, I'm not happy about them doing this, I would like them withdrawn from this, so on and so forth. Rather than just sitting there and not bothering to do anything. That's one thing we do. Secondly, approach the school for prayer facilities. I mean, the reward of if one of you went to your local school and said, have you got a prayer room? Especially where there's lots of Muslims, just say, would you have a prayer room for lunchtime? Do the prayer room in Jummah? Make some point of actually. It's obviously much more powerful if you have a child in the school. But even if you don't, go up to them and say, do you have a prayer facilities for Muslim students? I'm interested to know. And then just imagine that you actually got something established. How much reward that would be for you, Yawm al-Qiyamah, that the Muslim students in that school have somewhere to pray. No point just saying, oh, forget it, they'll come back and pray, or they'll read it at night, because namaz, something like this. they have to pray on their time. So it's important that you allow yourselves, or allow your children to go to schools where there is a prayer room. And it might be something, if you have to, as I know many of us, we're in a situation where we have to send our children to these schools. Find a school where there is a prayer room, find a school where there is an Islamic society, find a school where there is some sort of formal kind of organization of the Muslim students. That would be much better than going to a school where there's absolutely nothing. And likewise for wudu facilities, you have to obviously educate your children effectively about Islam. This is what we're here today about the parents' seminar. Educate your children, let them know what is right, what is wrong, explaining to them the basics of Islam, why things are haram, why things are halal. Doing all this to educate your children, so when people do ask them, and mashallah, sometimes you hear some of the students are very vociferous, they're very kind of knowledgeable, and they can answer back to teachers about why they can't do certain things. And they're not shy to say, this is haram because of this. And they can actually, some students will turn back and start giving dawah to teachers. And it brings me on to a teacher at my current school, became Muslim. And, I don't know if he's Muslim, but when I sat down with him once, he started explaining to me, I've become Muslim. I became Muslim 2 years ago, and I fasted in Ramadan 2 years ago, so on and so forth. And I started talking to him, I said, how'd that happen? He said, well, I had a lovely class. I was like, subhanAllah. He had a form class that just gave him dawah every day. He goes, we used to come to registration and we used to discuss Islam. That was our morning registration. And we used to have this rubbish lesson, he said, called careers, talking about the careers, and they would just forget careers and they'll start talking about Islam to me. And he goes, they're so nice, and they're so pleasant, and they're so knowledgeable about the religion that I knew this was the truth. And he became Muslim. So it shows that if your children are educated, if your children are in a position where they can not hide their religion, but promote their religion, schools are a place where it's amazing, where there's so much fertile ground for the Muslims and non-Muslims. Many times you'll read stories about non-Muslims, and they'll say, when I was 10, I used to see the Muslims pray in school, and I was wondering what they were doing, and I didn't realize until 7 years later that they were praying. And it puts a little thing in their heart, and that's why I often think, alhamdulillah, we pray. In my last school, we used to pray in the hall, and we used to see kids line up for dinner every day. So it's to see us pray every single day. And I think to myself, well, if nothing else, they've seen us pray, it's put something in their mind that these Muslims are praying. And sometimes we get students say, can I come in and listen for Jummah? We say, yeah, of course you can. And they'll come in and they'll listen. So educating your children, not just to, just to survive, but to thrive even, is very, very important. Approach Muslim teachers. I mean, I've seen so many sisters and so many brothers come to the school, and initially they're surprised when they see me. They think, oh, 1 minute, it's a Muslim there. And obviously they're more likely to approach me because I'm a Muslim. So in the same way, you should approach the Muslim teachers within your children's schools. Go to the teacher, say, excuse me, brother, assalamu alaikum. I was wondering, do you have Jummah facilities? Do you have prayer facilities? What do you do for wudu? What do you do for X, Y, and Z? And ask these questions. Yeah? And I'm more than sure, inshallah, I hope that the Muslim teacher will help you. He will be more than happy, and she will be more than happy to actually help you in your query. And sometimes it's just on other issues. But obviously you're going to have a more receptive ear, more kind of a better reception from a Muslim teacher who will understand your worries or your fears. And likewise, approach other Muslim parents. It's good that if you're in a school where there's lots of Muslims, have a little organization where all the Muslims are together. You can speak to yourselves and organize something, approach the head teacher, ask about a particular issue. Why can't we have a prayer room? Why can't they pray Jummah? Why can't they grow their beard? Why can't they wear the hijab, and so on and so forth? And you can find that many times when the schools are approached by a number of parents, they will have to respond, because schools serve their communities. And in almost every school, the link between the school and the wider community is always reported on. And in many ways, it depends on the school once again. Some schools will be, maybe anti this, but lots of schools will be open to suggestions from the local community, because it looks good for them. It looks good that, we're talking to the local community, 50 Muslim parents came, and because of that we open up a prayer room. When they're applying for things or doing a report, they use this kind of information to actually show off, if you want a better word. And finally, so two more things. And Bro mentioned that I was enrolled as a governor of a primary school, which wasn't, once again it was majority, well, I don't know if it was majority Muslim, but there were a number of Muslims on in the school. I don't know how familiar you are, but the most powerful body within a school are the governors. They have the power to hire and fire the head teacher. They make decisions about the school day. They'll make decisions about policies and procedures, so on and so forth. And let me just give you two examples of where I think having Muslims on the governing body would be of benefit. In my last school, they've just changed the lunch hours so that Muslims can no longer pray Jummah on this time. Now, something like that would have had to have gone in front of the governing body, so that the governing body would have to decide, okay, we agree with this or we disagree with this. Now, if there had been Muslims on the governing body, if there had been people of the local community on the board, they would have seen that. It doesn't take Einstein to work out, 1 minute, if lunch finishes at 1:45, how are they going to pray Jummah? And these are the kind of issues that you could have solved. You could have said, no, we oppose this change because it will not allow the Muslims to pray on Friday, and they must pray on Friday in congregation. And then they may have changed the decision, or they definitely would have at least been recorded that you made your objection very clear, and they may well have had to change their decision. Secondly, there's a new thing now in schools. Well, not schools, but it's not a new thing, but it's like a theory called multiple intelligences, that human beings learn in different ways. So some of us are, oral learners, some are visual learners, some are kinesthetic learners. Others of us, we learn better when we have things like music playing. And there's schools now, believe it or not, where in every single classroom they've got a little sound system set up and they play music. So the lesson starts, 2 minutes, teacher starts introduction, and then bang, turn the music on, and all the rap music coming out, and all this kind of rubbish. And I was in the school, and I was like, what's going on here? He goes, oh no, we have a theory, we have a policy that every lesson should have music. Students will work better, they will be more motivated to do well, so on and so forth. For Ajib, subhanAllah. So that's another thing that they couldn't have done except with the permission of the governing body. If a Muslim had been there, well, this was a non-Muslim, it's a Catholic school anyway, so it wasn't really kind of relevant, but it's something which, if it comes in one school and it works well, the head teacher is discussing themselves, oh, it's worked very well, because I'll try that as well. And he starts investing, and soon you'll have the whole school, just pumping to rap music all day. That's something which you can prevent if you were a governor on a parent governor or a teacher governor, if your teacher's in the school, on the governing body. This is something you can prevent. So it's not just about send that child to school and all the best, son, and come back in the evening and what have you done today, a bit of homework. It needs much more from us. Where we have Muslims in the majority in schools, as there are many schools in London where the Muslims are the majority, we need to be proactive. We can't allow ourselves to sit back and let everything be dictated to us. The reality, as I mentioned before, is that our children are sent to these environments on a daily basis, day in, day out. They're pumped up with all this information, which is haram. So either we're not going to send them to school, which, to be honest, the last thing I was going to say, is probably better not to send them to school. Sounds a bit silly for me to say that as a teacher, but I would think very, very closely before I send my son to a school in this country, because half the time they're involved in nonsense. The amount of time where they're actually learning something, if you calculate it in a day, cut out all the breaks, cut out all the nonsense in the lessons, and lots of schools are very, very poor because of behaviour problems. Cut all that out, and you're left with a small amount of time, maybe of, Allah, maybe 2 hours of actual learning time during the whole school day. So you send them to school 8 o'clock in the morning, they come back at 5 in the evening, and you think, oh, they've been all day at school, wonderful. But in reality, how much time have they actually spent in learning something? And it may only be 2 hours. So rather than send them out somewhere, get together with a group of parents, maybe 10, 15 parents, hire one teacher and get them to teach the core subjects. Khalas, end of story. You save yourself the hassle of traveling to or from school and so on and so forth. I mean, obviously there's other logistical problems, but that is something you can do. But if your children are in schools, and that's why, I mean, personally I try to help them as much as I can, because I am in a school where there's lots of Muslims. I don't allow it just to kind of pass me by. I do take a proactive role in trying to develop Muslims. So if you can, do that. But before that, I mean, like I said, it sounds a bit silly, but before that, think very carefully about sending your children to a non-Muslim school. Finally, just with regards to Ramadan, it is an opportunity for Muslims to actually promote their religion. Obviously, we're in a time where all schools will say, "Oh, this is the month of Ramadan," and they'll go through and explain about what Ramadan is, because it's a big event. It's an opportunity for us to actually, people who work within schools, and maybe even if you're not in schools, approach the school, say, "We'd like to approach you, maybe we could do a talk, an assembly about Islam, assembly about Ramadan." If nothing else, you increase the knowledge of non-Muslims about Islam. You break down some of the stereotypes of non-Muslims about Islam. So you go to school, you do an assembly maybe in a local school, or you organize a exhibition, Islamic exhibition, talking about Islam's contribution to all the subjects, mathematics, science, so on and so forth. Something like that, so that you use this time proactively rather than allowing it to pass you by once again. Inshallah, I hope that the talk's been beneficial. I'll take questions if I have to.
I can't hear you, but you can't go.
School trips. Yeah. I had this article, another article. There is an issue with school trips, of course. I didn't mention that, where obviously it's haram for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned for a woman to travel for more than one night without her mahram. And once again, schools will push these trips to France for a week, Spain for a week. Skiing in the Alps for this long, going up to the Lake District, going to Scotland, all these schemes every so often about sending your children out. Obviously for the sisters it's particularly a problem, but also for your sons. Let's not think that, oh, okay, it's my son, let him go out and discover the nature and so on and so forth. Because when they go on these trips, what do you think they get up to? Yeah, they're left alone. Not necessarily unsupervised, but obviously they're kids, yeah, they've got imagination, so they may get involved in things which are, like I mentioned before, it leads on to haram. So they will be supervised in the daytime activities, but then at night they let them go off, and teachers are always okay, they're kids, it's that time of your life, let them enjoy it, and that kind of attitude will be prevalent amongst the teachers. The teachers will probably be in the pub anyway, drinking, right? And leave the kids to do what they wish. So Jazakallah khair to the brother. He mentioned school trips. Yeah, that's something we need to also be very wary of. And the thing is, schools will push you. They'll say, "Why can't you let your daughter out? Why can't you let your son go? Why can't you? Why can't you?" And they'll keep pushing you. And there's another thing that it helps when there's Muslims within the school to say, "Excuse me, look. Fair enough that you want to go send children on trips, yeah, but do appreciate that Muslims will not send their children on trips, or trips, especially daughters, for longer than 1 day, or they will be very reluctant to send their children." But then again, having said all that, let's go back to what I'm saying about parents. Some parents will say, "Okay, fine, off you go. Go for a week, go for 2 weeks, there's no problem." They won't be particularly bothered about letting their children go out for so long. My son goes to a Church of England school. His class teacher has asked me to give a little talk to the children about Islam. Do you have any suggestions what I can talk about to 4-year-old children? To be honest, I don't deal with young children. I'm older, 11 to 18, but inshallah what you could do, especially young children, because many of them are close to their fitrah anyway. You could. I would do something like talking about, especially in Church of England school, how Jesus is a prophet of Islam, and how all these prophets were all calling you to worship one God, and that God was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so on and so forth. Keeping it very, very simple. It may well confuse them, and the teacher might say you confuse the children, but at least you're giving some clear information to the children. And it probably, if you probably won't be able to say that actually. You probably might say don't get involved with talking about Jesus or anything like that, because if it's a Church of England school, they probably have a very clear understanding of how they view Jesus, so on and so forth. So it might be a good idea to try to do that, inshallah, and if they do allow you to do that. And if nothing else, just talk about how we believe in all the prophets and Moses. Because many times, the thing that many non-Muslims find amazing, that 1 minute, oh, you believe in Moses, oh, you believe in Abraham, oh, you believe in Adam, and always kind of, they just think, it's Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Arab, you're all like Asians or Arabs, that's all you are, that's that kind of religion from that kind of part of the world, and nothing else. And they get shocked when you tell them, actually, we believe in all the prophets, we believe in all the messengers, we affirm all of them, and we just believe that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final prophet. Allah. It says, recently a sister aged 12 refused to play musical instruments at her school. The teacher told her to bring in the evidence with her to prove this, and she did, mashallah. However, although the music teacher was okay with everything, the head of year shouted at the sister and told her she has to attend the lesson. Reasons given were, we allow you to wear the headscarf, so now you should give some back to us. If you don't like our curriculum, go to an Islamic school. A letter of complaint was written to the head teacher, who basically backed up her teacher. What can we do about this issue, as it is an ongoing problem in this school which is not being addressed? First of all, it's a lot of nonsense. We allow you to wear the headscarf, so now you should come back to us. That's ridiculous kind of statement. This is what I mean. You see, the kind of people you have, it's heavily probably an alcoholic of some sort, right? And he's probably just got angry, why is Muslims doing this, or started shouting at the sister. But this is a classic example of things that can occur and are occurring daily in non-Muslim schools. Today we hear about this because the sisters or the brother mentioned this. What I would do is, firstly, go straight to the Board of Governors, because above the head teacher is the Board of Governors. And in the Board of Governors, there is a Chair of Governors who is the chair of the whole committee. Write directly to them and say you're very upset about the fact that, firstly, you were religiously discriminated against, and you've got to use these kind of terms. These are the kind of terms you have to basically bring out. You're religiously discriminated against because you refused to play a musical instrument which is against your religion. You were shouted out. Be very clear, be very emotive if you have to. Say that. And not only that, the head teacher refused to investigate, or the head teacher refused to follow through the issue, and it was forgotten about. I would like to see this taken up and complain. Official complaint to the Chair of Governors from that school. Now, most times the Chair of Governors will support their head teacher, okay? But at the same time, by you making a fuss about it, they will have to have some sort of formal response. And this is when they'll go over to someone like, some sort of religious authority. And this is where our religious authority let us down, because they'll probably find some wishy-washy liberal Muslim will say, oh, no, it's okay, you can play music and so on and so forth. And they'll use that against you. Then you're really stuck, because they're basically saying is the Muslims are saying it, you're an extremist, you don't let your daughter play, a musical instrument, in which case, Allah musta'an. But at the very least, write a letter to your Board of Governors, your Chair of Governors for the governing body of your school. Write a very strong letter of complaint, explain how your daughter was victimized by this head of year, and that you are lodging an official complaint, and send a copy to the head teacher, a copy to the head of year. Let them know that you're making a fuss. Most times Muslims just give up, say, oh, okay, forget it, because unfortunately, like I said before, another thing that I didn't mention before is that many of our parents can't speak English, so it's like, I don't want to make a fuss, things going to go wrong, so on and so forth. Make a fuss, go to the school and say, can I have a translator? Demand a translator, say, I want a translator to come and translate for me. And most times you'll find someone on the school body teaching in the school who can speak Urdu or Punjabi or Arabic or something, and they will come and they'll translate for you. Don't be, like I said, feel inferior or in any way feel that you have to give in to the demands of the school.
Some questions on
Can the sisters quiet down, please, because some of the others cannot hear. Jazakumullah khairah. There are a lot of children's Islamic books with drawings of people and animals in. Are they haram? Toys, those which can be quiet, lifelike, are they haram? I'm not qualified to answer that question, inshallah, but there is a very good book on there is a very good book on Islamic ruling on pictures, which you can refer to. I think I prefer to let someone else answer that, inshallah. Should we stop our children playing music, singing, drawing, etc. in infant and primary schools? Yes, playing music is haram. Singing accompanied by music is haram. If the singing does not involve any lewd or horrible verses, or it's not like praising Jesus, Son of God, or something like that, then inshallah it's not a problem. But it's very rare you're going to get them to sing without music, especially if it's a non-Muslim school. You'll get that. Drawing of human beings, of course, it's clear. The hadith mentioned Prophet Muhammad said they're the worst of people on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So you do not want to get involved in drawing. The Prophet Muhammad advised one of the Sahabis who discovered was doing this to draw landscapes. Draw life drawings of mountains and greenery and stuff like that. Don't get involved in drawing any faces, so on and so forth. Because the thing is, okay, at the moment they're young, they're not accountable, but you are. As a parent, you'll be held accountable for that particular sin. And obviously, once they start doing it, when they get to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, they'll say, Mum, why can't I do it? Dad, why can't I do it? Because I used to do it. So it's all about tarbiyah, bring up your children, cultivate your children correctly. So it's important, I think, that you don't allow them to do that.
It's just a question from the floor.
No. PSE? Okay, Bros mentioned PSE or personal social education or personal social health and education, PSHE, or citizenship, which is another kind of subject in the kind of area. Basically, these subjects are something which are taught in schools. I don't want to mention this because it's a bit embarrassing, but I mentioned just to show you the kind of things that they deal with. Last week, my form class mentioned that in their PSHE lesson, they were told how to use a condom, and that if you put baby oil on it, but it splits. And I thought, subhanAllah, I heard this and I was like, subhanAllah, it can't be true, I must be hearing things. But this is the kind of things that they're being taught. These are the kind of things that they're being taught. And this whole issue of sexual education, it goes back to what I mentioned before. We're not necessarily, I'm not going to say that it necessarily promotes sexual activity just by talking about, the human body, so on and so forth. But it definitely desensitizes the issue amongst the minds of the Muslims. They no longer see it as being something that they should be shy or, or in any way, embarrassed about. We talk about these kind of things openly, and they all have a good laugh, and so on and so forth. But these things are being taught, and when they're being taught in such a way, because more than likely the teacher's teaching is promiscuous anyway, right? So he's or she's teaching it with their own kind of agenda. So they're not saying, for example, that you shouldn't be wrong this, so on and so forth. The hidden curriculum again. They're pushing these ideas across to the students. And then you go into other things like drugs. they'll mention talking about drugs and how, what drugs are, what do they look like, what happened with drugs, so on and so forth. Once again, desensitize the issues in the life or the mind of the Muslims, and it makes it more difficult. Is that what you meant, Akhi? Yeah, I mean, it's one of those subjects that no one ever thinks about. It's that old subject where you sit as a form class together and you talk about things, but you don't actually, do exam. You don't actually do any formal assessment. Sometimes you never hear about it, but it is actually something which involves things like this. And it's like relationships, pregnancy, drugs, rights of respecting elders, those kind of general things which make people better people. But obviously, as Muslims, they involve children in things which are completely haram. What rights do parents have of taking children out of certain activities, i.e. Diwali, Christmas assemblies, making Christmas cards, Easter cards, etc.? You have every right. Just go up to the school, say, excuse me, I'm a Muslim, these things are haram. Well, you won't say haram, but these things are against my religion. We're not allowed to promote, we're not allowed to get involved with ourselves in other religious activities. And therefore, I would not like my son, my daughter to be involved in this. And they would have to respect your wishes. More than likely, they may be, might start thinking, as a troublemaker here, she won't let or he won't let the children get involved in this. But let them think what they think. You just have to do what's right by your children. You have to do what's right by Islam. You have to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before you ever please the people. So just say, sorry, my child is not allowed to do this, so on and so forth. End of story. It may well cause problems within the classes and so on and so forth, but like I said, ignore that. Just don't let them do it, inshallah. I would like to know if there are parenting classes for Muslim parents and also for newlyweds. Allah, I don't know of any at the moment, to be honest, inshallah. But this whole kind of parenting seminar, the whole concept is to try to help not just parents, but sisters and brothers who are not married and newlyweds who have got children to be thinking about these issues from now, because obviously time flies. Before you know it, you'll have children. You'll be in a situation where your child will have to go to a nursery, your child will have to go to school, secondary school, so on and so forth. So being aware of your rights is very, very important, from any time.
Why don't you have to make it the power? You are only giving the problem, everybody knows. You must have a government body, as a school teacher experience. You should have the parents with difficulties. There's a government body, there's a legislation body for the Muslims. Because anybody cannot write a letter, maybe. Anybody cannot parents, There's a lot of problem. You talk about the problem. Action is you need action is advise the people how to do it, what to do, you are telling them, but there's no any opportunities to fight.
Bro was mentioning that I've mentioned a lot of problems regarding Muslim schools, but no solutions. I did mention a number of solutions at the bottom of the end of my talk, and he's mentioned that bodies to help write letters, so on and so forth. I mean, I don't think that there's anyone here who lives in a vacuum. Everyone knows someone in their community that can write a letter. Everyone knows someone within their family maybe, or with their close friends who can write in English, and they can write a letter. You have to ask them. Unfortunately, of course, it's right that we haven't got any organisation as Muslims. We're probably the most disorganised, group of people there are. So we can't do much, but we need to be able to, as much as we can in our current situation, do what we can. So that's what I said. If you go to a school and you see a Muslim teacher, approach the Muslim teacher. Say to the teacher, look, I'm not very happy about my son doing this. Can you help me? And I'm sure, inshallah, the brother